Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the OK Grognard Show. It is Wednesday, October 21st, 2020, 10 a.m. Central, in beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Well, it's Wednesday. That means it's campaign discussion day. We were talking about economics last week, and it was a rather detailed section following the economics section on duties, excises, fees, tariffs, taxes, tithes, and tolls. Hey, Bob. How's it going, buddy? Thanks for coming out today. And we got through the main portion of the economics section and then held off on the next section until we could do this week. Part 2, economics part 2. We'll call it that. That's what it is. And let's see here. Duties, excises, fees, tariffs, taxes, tithes, and tolls. That's a lot. But it is a campaign consideration because this is how economics can most easily be affected by player characters and their machinations within the setting. So this is where the rubber hits the road for economics and player characters. What society can exist without revenues? So they say. What better way? Here, we're going to adjust this so I'm not hiding halfway between. What better way? No, what better means of assuring revenues and taxation on all of the names used in the title of this section? Let's start that over. What society can exist without revenues? What better means of assuring revenues than taxation? And all of the names used in the title of this section are synonymous with taxes. But if it is called something different, perhaps the populace won't take too much umbrage at having to pay and pay and pay. Ellipsis. It is important in most campaigns to take excess monies away from player characters, and taxation is one of the better means of accomplishing this end. I'm going to stop it right there. You know, he looks fired. What's up? Tax them all, make them pay. There you go. I'm of a mind that it can happen occasionally that they get so much money that they can then purchase things that you feel might unbalance a campaign that you are running. Well, I think it's safe to say that if you've given them money, which you haven't, you make them earn it, right? I mean, you put it places where they can find it. You often have it guarded. If they overcome those obstacles, whether they're traps or monsters or whatever, and gain that treasure, you really haven't given it to them. It's not excess monies. They've earned it. If you put too much somewhere, that doesn't mean it's excess monies for them. It's just that you've learned a lesson about poor planning as a DM. So you need to put less money laying around, or if you don't have means by which they can use large sums of money to get the things they need to become tougher adventurers and to face larger challenges, then instead of leaving monies laying around, you should be leaving objects that can help them. And also objects that can't. Pieces of art. Things that, while they have value, are not easily liquidated. Things that require a certain amount of finesse, and things that can be traded for other things. A portrait of the third ruler of the kingdom that's 500 years old could be pretty valuable to a family that wants to prove some lineage, even if it's not in and of itself a work of art. And they might have some artifact from some period past in their possession that could be traded to. So there are ways of not necessarily putting items within dungeons, but having them available to players without having a magic shop, which a lot of people would prefer not to have, myself included. I don't like having shops where people can just get magic. I enjoy having, in larger cities and towns, a wizard in a tower who's doing research and who might have some few things that he mostly won't get rid of, although he'll help you out with components and he'll work with you on scrolls, sometimes potions. So too, temples in towns and various places. Healing, I usually try to make readily available through a shrine or a temple or even a wandering cleric of some order or other. But, anything beyond potions and scrolls, I usually, and scrolls too with the wizards, right? But anything beyond those basic, let's call them consumable items, because they usually are one and done sort of things, I tend to think are better found by delving, by going into dungeons and meeting up against obstacles and stuff. So a lot of this won't apply to campaigns like mine. There'll be some minor tax things to deal with. But if I've been careful not to just leave piles of money laying around that can then flood into society, then I've done a better job, I think, of DMing my particular setting, because my particular setting does not want to have piles of money being dug out of one place and brought into society and have these old coins floating around. Duties are typically paid on goods brought into a country or subdivision thereof. So any furs, tapestries, etc. brought into a town for sale will probably be subject to duty. Excises are typically sums paid to belong to a particular profession or practice, a certain calling. I sometimes do this. In addition, an excise can be levied against foreign currency. For example, in order to change it into a less remarkable coin of the realm. And yes, I do this with ancient coins. They're usually more valuable, but because they can't be directly spent in a town without raising eyebrows, a lot of times they have to be used at money changers. Money changers will always take a cut to change older coins or foreign coins into coins that are locally used and will be accepted by local merchants and whatnot. Fees can be levied for just about any reason. Enter a city gate is a good one for non-citizens. Tariffs are much the same as duties, except, but let us suppose that this is levied against only certain items when purchased. such as a surtax, or it can be used against goods not covered by the duty list. Taxes are typically paid only by residents and citizens of a municipality and include those sums for upkeep of roads and streets and walls and gates, and municipal expenses for administration and services. Taxation is not necessarily an annual affair. For special taxes can be levied whenever needful, particularly upon sales, services, and foreigners in general. Tithes are principally religious taxation, although there is no prohibition against the combination of the secular with the sacred in the municipality. Thus, a tithe can be extracted from all sums brought into the community by any resident. The monies going to the religious organization sponsored by the community or to that of the character's choosing at your option. Of course, any religious organizations within a municipality will have to pay heavy taxes unless they are officially recognized by the authorities. Tithes is something I definitely use. Any cleric in the game is going to need to tithe his own temple, 10% of his wealth. So too paladins, if that cleric wishes to spend any time at that temple. Otherwise, it's assumed he's attached to another temple, and they don't chase you down. But if you stop in a temple that's you're tied to, you're expected to tithe if you bring your group with you. If any of them want any healing, if they want any help, if they want, and depending on how much you tithe, they can be quite generous. They have, often in larger towns, they have extra rooms for individuals that are traveling from here to there, dignitaries or other temple officials that are from other towns. So certain temples will have room to put adventurers up. And so, you can stay free at a temple if it's one that you regularly tithe and tithe well. If everybody in the group is tithing, I'll often have a temple give a sort of a discount on healing. Okay, well, you're a favored member of this particular temple, so we will offer you some benefit in reduced. We won't charge what we would normally charge for healing or for our special services. Certainly, if they have the ability to put together potions and scrolls, and they would normally offer these up in trade or for sale, you get extra consideration if you're regularly tithing that church, that temple. So, all that said, tolls, finally, are sums paid for the use of any road, bridge, ferry, etc. They are paid according to the numbers of persons, animals, carts, wagons, and possibly even materials transported. That I like to do too, doesn't come up a lot, but there are places where there are large bridges, which are the only way across large waters, and unless you have some other way across, chip in. It's usually not enough. There's a ferry in one of the main towns that will take people across the river. It's a copper. Usually, if there's a group that's playing in the setting and they are going to be in and out of that place a lot, they'll overpay in advance, and the ferryman will just hop on, take you across. No, you've already paid plenty. And usually they wind up paying a lot more than they would need to, but it's a drop in a bucket for them, except when they're very low level. If the general reader thinks that the taxation, he or she... Oh, let me take a quick look over the chat here, because we've got guys chiming in. Whew. I'm missing a whole lot of chatter over here. Sorry, guys. George, Bob, text them all, text them, pay. There we go. We're back up to where we were. I need to have my traveler group pay some imperial taxes, Bob is saying. Things have gotten too easy for them. Of course, starship upkeep is expensive. Yeah, that'll drain a lot. And upgrading, too. I mean, if they're not just paying for upkeep and they have extra funds, they can upgrade some systems and they'll find ways to spend it. When you've got a vehicle, or in the case of D&D or something like that, you've got property to maintain, monies go pretty fast. So, George says fuel surcharge, pumping tax, and maintenance fees. Absolutely. They usually skim, Bob says. Gas giants or scoop water and process on a planet? Sure. Got to pick up the easy meat with your eyes closed, huh? Honestly, my group is usually exploring unknown space, and the money doesn't help them very much. Yeah, yeah. You could have a ton of credit sitting in your account, but if you're out in deep space, what are you using it for? Right now, as a company, they have about 900,000 credits. That's a lot, but a small ship costs 15 million. A tramp freighter is like 32 millions. So they have enough for repairs and stuff, but not like they're rich. No, not even close. The episode This episode has me thinking though. Maybe they need to be considered residents of a particular planet and pay taxes there, plus imperial stuff. I don't know, unless they're staying there. I wouldn't. They can pay docking fees, and those can rise and fall depending on whether or not they want a lot of people in, or depending on whether the local uppity up wants extra money. He might say, all right, I'm telling all the docks, anybody who docks pays this additional docking fee. I would think that having a home temple where they are friends would be nice. Nice, safe place to stay, too. Absolutely. It takes a lot of headaches off. It lets you hand wave a lot of downtime and move it forward and just get to the, well, what is it you're going to be doing? What are you going to be doing? What are you going to be doing? Your place is already covered, so this is where everybody's staying, unless you tell me otherwise. Okay, you're doing research on this, you're working on this, and you're scouring the city for a better sword or whatever. All right, make some rolls, and I can move that along, and we don't have to role play every footfall in the town, which in some cases uh, could be fun, but in other cases can be delaying their getting back into an underworld that they're anxious to explore, and they don't want to take up 3-4 hours of game time this week just wandering around the city. They just want to get in and get out, and so we want to move the timeline forward a couple of weeks while they do this research and this searching for something, and we want to know that they can safely stay in a place and they're not going to poke their heads out except on business, so they're not going to have a lot of wandering trouble or randomness. How about taxes to the local thugs like the Thieves Guild? Absolutely. If there's an extortion ring in an area where they're staying and there's seen as easy marks, and certainly if they're a new entity in an area, well, if nobody knows if they're easy marks, somebody's got to poke the bear a little bit and see what happens, because sometimes you can just they don't want to be bothered. They just as soon pay whatever is asked for rather than now if they show some resistance, then there's a new decision to be made for those doing the potential extorting. But it's a give and take. But there can be a lot of time spent on things that aren't part of the excitement of the game as it is. And let's not forget, when we talk about GM pacing, maybe this is something that should be a whole episode on a Thursday. But when we talk about GM pacing, there's a lot more to it than just trying to go as fast as you can so you can get through as much dungeon as you can in a given evening or whatever, right? That's a part of it. It's a large part of it because people will wander around a room and poke and prod and search and whatever and waste hours on something that's not there. And sometimes it's good to let people do that because other things transpire while they're doing that, and that's okay. If you don't put them on a clock, if water isn't running into the room or sand or something, and they can be in that room as long as they want, sometimes they're going to be there for a while. Um, However, pacing is more than just what's happening like that. Pacing is also about campaign pacing, which is to say, you don't. Part of the tension that builds in a game, and you're not, again, the story doesn't exist until after the game is over, and through gameplay, the story is what comes out, whatever it is. However, story elements that you create and add into a campaign, such as people and places and things, are just parts of what could become the story that comes out of the game. There are situations that can help, and there's a certain amount of tension that can be thrown in there by quote unquote putting a clock on things. So if they have all the time in the world to wander around town and whatever they were doing outside of town, say an adventure location, a ruins, is just going to sit there and it'll just wait for them until they come back and remain sort of status quo, then yeah, there's no pressure time wise on them. But if, because they've gone to and from town and come back and have spoken about this to any individuals, whether it's, hey, I need some healing potions, how'd you get hurt? Well, those ruins, blah, blah, blah. Oh, is there stuff out there? Well, that kind of word gets around. There will be other people that will stick their neck out, even if it's just to have it chopped off and go out there. So, uh, even if you don't put a rival group into play that will go out and strip the place bare before they get back to it if they dawdle, if you just put some goof goes out there and does die on the ruins to a couple of skeletons, somebody who shouldn't have ever gone out there in the first place, when those adventurers return and they see uh, Johnny the jeweler's apprentice apparently came out here on a gem hunt. He thought, well, the ruins, there might be stuff out there. I'll go out there, and then he gets himself killed. Well, even though there was no threat of losing anything for the adventurers, for the player characters, for the players, uh, they still have the understanding that what if it had been Johnny the jeweler's apprentice? And yeah, how are we going to answer that too? It's kind of our fault, even mentioning that this was out here. We got it into his head, perhaps. That's something to deal with. But they also know that word can get around, and others could come out here and get stuff done ahead of them and stuff. So maybe now there's a clock on this location. Now that this is a known location and the people know there's treasure here, we better be the ones to deal with this as quickly as possible so that we get the lion's share of what's going on there. So that's a thing. What do we got here? Let's see. If the general reader thinks that taxation he or she currently undergoes is a trifle strenuous for his or her income, pity the typical European populace of the Middle Ages. They paid all of the above, tolls being very frequent, and those trying to escape them by using the byway being subject to confiscation of all goods with a fine and imprisonment possible. Also, and hey, you want to use the woods to get around um, a toll booth or whatever, go right ahead. But there's bandits in the woods, so one way or another, something's gonna be paid, right? Every petty noble made an extraction. Municipalities taxed, and the sovereign was the worst of all. Eventually, merchants banded together to form associations to protect themselves from such robberies, but peasants and other commoners could only revolt and dream of better times. Barter was common because hard money was so rare. However, in the typical fantasy milieu, yay, we deal with great sums of precious metals, so use levies against player character gains accordingly. Here is an example of a system which might be helpful to you in developing your own. The town charges 1% duty on all normal goods brought into the place for sale: foodstuff, clothes, cloth and hides, livestock, raw materials, and manufactured goods. Foreigners must pay this duty, but at a double rate, 2%. Luxury items, precious goods, wine, furs, spirits, metals such as copper, gold, jewelry, and the like pay a tariff in addition to the duty, a 5% value charge, if such are to be sold, and special forms for sale. This is all well and good. And if you want to devise a system like that, or use this one as is, there are all sorts of numbers to deal with in here, and it's not that tough, really. You could go through all of this and figure out exactly what it is. You can do one of two things. You can keep this in your head. Citizens must pay a tax of 5% on property in order to defray the cost of. You can keep all of this in your head. Handle it as the DM and save yourself hours of time at a table over the course of a campaign, which would be spent with the players with their heads down, with a pencil in hand. Oh, but I've got to pay this much for those, oh, this much for those. Oh. Or you can shorthand it and give people an option. Just say, hey, this is what so and so wants to charge for this. You can pay it, you can not pay it. You don't have to live in this town. You don't have to do any of the things. You can be run out of town by the guards. You can be asked to leave. You could be, pay it or don't. Um, and after several instances of stuff like this, much like with the ferryman I was talking about earlier, you can say, hey, you're coming back to town with this much. Shall I just take off that 10%? Should we play that out? How do you want to handle it? Usually you just got to get, yeah, we'll pay the 10%. Yeah, we'll pay the taxes. Yeah, we'll pay the fines. But at least it's transparent, it's quick, it's done, and but make sure they understand what they're getting, whether that's a lot or not at all. If there's no benefit to paying these taxes, maybe that's the impetus for them to get up and go somewhere else. Maybe it's the impetus for them to save up their monies and start their own community. Maybe there are ways for them to spend their money that have nothing to do with being nickel and dimed at the local noble's town. So make sure that they understand all the options and it doesn't just become, well, here's how much money you got out of the dungeon and this percentage goes to the town and we're done. Make sure they know what places they have to go that are alternatives. And if they research them, let them have some idea about what sort of costs are going to be involved in moving to this other place. The town does not encourage the use of foreign currency. Merchants and other business people must pay a fine of 5% of the value of foreign coin within the possession, plus face certain confiscation of coins, typically not accept them. Upon entering the town, non-residents are instructed to go to the street of money changers in order to trade their foreign money for copper cons, silver knobs, gold orbs, and platinum royals. Exchange rate is a mere 90%. I usually have the exchange rate more like a 10%. I don't beat up the players over this, but you can check this out and decide if you want to be this this tough on the players. Can prove they're in town 24 hours. He or she was on his way to a money changers when stopped. Okay, so yeah, you can have guards. You can have guards stop people and talk to them and have you been to the money changers and all that other stuff if you want. Anyway, that is the long and the short of saying keep an eye on them. Keep an eye on the expenses and make sure that they are paying these taxes, tithes, and as was mentioned, this is a way that if you've given them too much, you can take some back from them. Always a call, right? I should turn that off when I just don't get that many calls. So I think we are done for the day because, yeah, we're about that time and I think we covered the whole thing. So let us say thanks to everybody who is chiming in on the stream chat and is following the show on Twitch. I appreciate it very much. And also, please do come on back tomorrow, 10 a.m. for GMing tips, building adventures on Friday, GM reviews on Saturday, the rules retrospective is on Sunday. We have weekly news and announcements on Monday, cartography and world building on Tuesday, campaign discussion, back around the horn to that on Wednesday. If you are catching this on YouTube, thank you very much as well. And be sure to subscribe to the channel. Make sure you give us a thumbs up on any videos you watch. I'd appreciate it. And come on back, 10 a.m. every day for the OK Grognard Show from beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Bye-bye.